On Saturday, June 21st, Americans found out they entered another war with the Middle East the same way that artists announced their new album, through a tweet. After 30 years of the real president of the United States trying to convince the public that Iran is developing a nuclear bomb, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu finally got what he's been working towards his entire career: an U.S. airstrike on Iran's nuclear facilities. Our pro-peace president does it again by bombing the third country since the start of his second term that started like 6 months ago. Doing so illegally, of course, because the United States does what the United States do, baby. The White House turns out more war criminals than Elon Musk turns out children. These strikes on Iran are a bit more consequential than the strikes on Yemen and Somalia, though. Not to discredit those strikes, those were also illegal and immoral, but Iran is a bit more of a developed country and has more of a capability to strike back. If you haven't been able to tell, I think a U.S. airstrike on Iran is completely unnecessary, and in fact, I actually think an Israeli airstrike on Iran is also completely unnecessary. And I'm going to break down my thoughts. It seems like everyone has thoughts on this scenario, but my thoughts are more important because I have a YouTube channel, so that means that I'm the authority on the matter. So on June, I think it was 13th, Israel violated international law by striking a sovereign nation. Of course, we know that Israel has no regard for international law or human life, so that's not a surprise there. Benjamin Netanyahu has been foaming at the mouth for decades of the thought of attacking, destabilizing, and causing regime change in Iran. For the record, going into this, by the way, I'm not pro-Islamic Republic of Iran, but I am most certainly not pro-apartheid Israel either. Since 1993, Benjamin Netanyahu has been going on public hearings fear-mongering about a nuclear warhead development in Iran, claiming that Iran is just years, months, or weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon. However, after decades, no nuke has ever come to fruition. And in fact, in 2015, the Obama administration actually reached a deal with Iran regarding their nuclear program, basically saying, hey, if you don't develop a nuclear weapon, we'll relieve some sanctions off of you. And Donald Trump then left that deal in 2018. 2025, he was trying to remake the deal, and then Israel just said, nope, fuck it, we're gonna take matters into our own hands, and we're just gonna bomb Iran. Netanyahu's government has been kind of on like a little bit of an emotional roller coaster for the past 18 months. Globally, a lot of people are starting to kind of wake up to the fact that Israel is, not really doing the right thing when it comes to their military operations in Gaza. While Israel's popularity has been declining globally, Netanyahu has also been experiencing some trouble back in his own home. With polls coming out saying that 73% of Israelis want him to resign, he barely survived a vote to dissolve parliament just a few hours before striking Iran. While I don't think Israel striking Iran is going to boost Israel's popularity globally, Bibi Netanyahu might be getting a little bit more of a popularity boost back home after striking Iran. A large portion of Jewish Israelis support military action in Iran, which of course is a demonic excuse for a leader will take anyone that he can get. And seeing as he's been trying to go to war with Iran for years now, this I guess seemed like the perfect time. Trump gave Iran 60 days for diplomacy, and on day 61, Israel said, all right, we're gonna attack you, Why should Iran be able to have a nuke? It's not like Israel has nukes, right? Right? Israel conducted their first strike on Iran, and it claimed that it was a necessary action because for some reason everybody seems to believe that if Iran had a nuke, they would just commit suicide by nuking Israel. I don't really understand the logic behind this, because if Iran did have a nuke and they launched a nuclear weapon against a sovereign nation, it would immediately prompt a response from the most nuclear armed state in the world. Also, Israel running their whole Iran is only weeks away from developing a nuclear weapon bit directly contradicts our own intelligence committee that says that Iran is actively not pursuing a nuclear weapon. Our own intelligence committee doesn't matter, of course, because we live in the United States of Israel, baby. And our president was given $230 million from pro-Israel interest groups. So whatever Israel wants, Israel gets. This might be a hot take, but I don't think going against international law and our own constitution to attack a nation on behalf of another nation is a very sound thing for the most powerful country in the world to do. You can tell me, yeah, but Iran hates America all you want, but that also kind of just tells me that you completely misunderstand the reason why Iran feels that way, and that you're not really basing your arguments off of historical context and only base value. I think it's absurd for someone to go, Iran hates America, so that's why we need to bomb Iran, and think that that's a serious thought to have. that doesn't contradict itself. I also just want to emphasize here that the only nation in the world that has ever used nuclear weapons is the United States, and the United States refuses to adopt a no first use policy. I support denuclearization as much as the next guy. Crazy thought, but I think having more nuclear weapons in the world leads to a more tense global order. But I also do think that there is an argument to be made that if Iran did have a nuke, we would not be in this situation in the first place. Do you really think Israel would strike Iran if they knew that Iran actually had a nuclear weapon? We have unfortunately created a world where you almost kind of need a nuclear weapon for your own safety. Take a look at Ukraine, for example. These poor guys, they gave up their nukes for an agreement that the West would come to their help if Russia were to ever invade Ukraine, which happened. Do you really think Russia would have invaded Ukraine had they still had their nukes? Probably not. I also think that this only increases the chances of Iran developing a nuclear weapon in the future. I feel like after seeing two countries violate international law by attacking your sovereign nation, you're going to be more likely to build up a nuclear arsenal in order to avoid this situation in the future. We also don't actually know how much damage we've done to the nuclear facility. We don't know where the enriched uranium is. I don't know who it was, but it was like an Iranian official said some quote like, "You cannot bomb knowledge." I was like, damn, that's like the hardest thing that you could have said in that moment. There might also be a deeper purpose to this attack rather than just, you know, the nuke warmongering. We know from Reuters that Israel actually wanted to kill the supreme leader of Iran, and Donald Trump was like, whoa, no, you shouldn't do that. Which I gave Donald Trump a win for that, but I have to retract that win because of this crazy schizo post that he put on Truth Social last night. The United States has a very long history with regime change. We actually did regime change in Iran about 70 years ago, where we backed a coup and reinstated the Shah, who was very pro-West, which actually led to the Islamic Revolution and, you know, kind of led to the current government of Iran rising up into power, which is why we are kind of in this situation right now. We kind of literally did this to ourselves. Western-backed regime change will probably never really work successfully because, like Donald Trump said fucking 2 months ago in Saudi Arabia, we don't understand the region. What gives us the authority to come in there and kind of fucking act like we own the place? Which is crazy that Donald Trump said that 2 months ago and is now talking about regime change. Anytime I try to give this guy some credit, he fucking finds a way to contradict himself. Now, obviously, no one knows if the strike in Iran will actually lead to regime change. I know for a fact that Israel wants regime change in Iran. Iran has already struck back at a U.S. military base in Qatar. There are some reports saying that Iran, you know, kind of gave some preliminary warning to Qatar about the attack so that way they can minimize casualty, so that way they can have more of like kind of a, I guess, symbolic attack rather than a full-on attack that can lead on more to a everlasting war. Okay, so a little update as I was editing. Donald Trump says that there's been a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. He's given them 12 hours to complete their final missions. We have no statement from either side, Israel or Iran. Trump could just be saying stuff. I don't know. It also seems like he's like saying that in the terms of the ceasefire that Iran has to stop striking 12 hours before Israel. I'm not really sure. It's worded really weird in his Truth Social post. I really hate how this is how we find out about this stuff, through his own social media platform. He also gave it a name. He gave the war a name, the 12-day war. Nice, Trump. We'll see. I mean, who knows what will happen. This is obviously a developing story. Now let's talk for a second about how people are reacting to this. Shockingly, the MAGA base is, you know, pretty split on this. Leading up to whether or not we would strike Iran, there was definitely some fractures happening within the MAGA base. I'm sure you've all seen that clip of Tucker Carlson going at Ted Cruz, which, you know, banger clip from Tucker Carlson. Never thought those words would ever exit my mouth, but, you know, you gotta give credit where credit's due. I do see a lot of these like pro-peace, no more wars in the Middle East type Republicans, you know, coming out and supporting Donald Trump now, even if they were, you know, against it in the past. It seems like their brain chips are kind of getting updated with the latest patch notes. Republican Representative Thomas Massie has actually been very critical of the strike. Democratic lawmakers, of course, are upset about the strike. However, they seem to be more upset about the fact that they didn't get to vote on it rather than, you know, the greater implications of the strike. Probably the most interesting response to the strikes in Iran, I have to say, is Marjorie Taylor Greene's response, who seems just upset about the fact that we're not bombing the cartel instead. I mean, what does the public think about this? Well, it seems like before the strikes on Iran, the majority of the US was not in favor of striking Iran. And a recent YouGov poll from June 22nd shows that 85% of Americans don't actually want to be at war with Iran. But the people who don't want the sequel to Iraq, don't worry, okay? Our vice president has a message for you guys.
I certainly empathize with Americans who are exhausted after 25 years of foreign entanglements in the Middle East. I understand the concern, but the difference is that back then we had dumb presidents, and now we have a president who actually knows how to accomplish America's national security objectives.
Now, isn't that reassuring? Just remember, our president isn't an idiot.